always thought that death contest as a metaphor for capitalism was a niche subgenre, but more and more of these types of stories are making their way into the spotlight. The Hunger Games, of course, and more recently Squid Game, but also in a slew of YA books that are currently being published. All Us Villains, co-authored by Amanda Foody and Christine Lynn Herman in 2021, and Hyde by Kirsten White coming out later this year, both employ death contests as their central story structure. And both of these books in their publishing blurbs explicitly mention Hunger Games and Squid Game. And those are only the ones I can think of off the top of my head. And while these stories align us with the contestants, we are Katniss and we are the players, the very fact that we are in reality an audience watching these shows actually aligns us with the audience of these various contests. We are the Capitol. We are the masked VIPs. And that's not to say that we're only one or the other, but we're both. Our realities literally align with the audience and metaphorically align with the contestants, but our sympathies only align with the contestants. These shows are very purposeful about eliciting a sense of disgust in the various audiences of these contests. And this necessarily creates a sort of cognitive dissonance when we're engaging with these stories. But this cognitive dissonance is exactly why these stories are successful. In 2008, there was this movie Untraceable, where an FBI agent is tasked with hunting down a seemingly untraceable serial killer who posts live videos of his victims on the internet. The more traffic he gets on the site, the further the process continues until finally his captive is dead. Now, this movie only has the audience aspect of the formula. Since there's no contest, there's no contestants, only victims. And keep in mind that this movie came out squarely within the heyday of the frenzy created by the Saw franchise, and so filmmakers were essentially trying to capitalize on the popularity of what was basically gore porn. But what's the most interesting thing about Untraceable isn't the movie itself, but of its central marketing campaign, a website called Kill With Me, which mirrored the website in the movie. So in 2008, if you were online trying to find information about the movie, you would invariably find yourself at this website. It was a blank page with this message: "This guy is going to die. You want to see his stinking flesh burn and bleed and blacken until he's some twisted dead thing? This is what you want. And I filmed it especially for you. The more fans I get, the more I'll show." And then there was a button asking if you'd like to continue. If you said yes, you would be navigated to a second page that gave you a warning. It said something along the lines of, "By proceeding, a real person will be tortured. Are you sure?" And then if you clicked yes again, you would be taken to another page that showed torture scenes from the movie, along with a huge banner at the top shaming you for clicking yes.
Shame. 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 Bad shame. Vampire.
This ad was ultimately banned for showing scenes of violence and blocked by most social media platforms. But I just find it fascinating that this campaign existed to capitalize on your interest while simultaneously shaming you for them. Before you even watch the movie, the narrative is placing you as an audience member and asking you to question your morality and your complicitness. And while the mechanism that's central to Untraceable is this voyeurism, that movie is more interested in dramatizing the consequences that anonymity on the internet could make possible. During the live stream torture scenes of the movie, you can see a scrolling chat function of the anonymous audience, and the comments are predictably disgusting. But now when we live in a world where we get in strangers' cars, accept food from them, even go on dates with them, the idea of anonymity posing a threat is less compelling. But in 2008, this movie didn't perform horribly, and it generally got positive reviews. Roger Ebert called this film smart and tightly told and merciless. But because of this shift in internet culture, it just doesn't have the lasting popularities that movies like Hunger Games have. Hunger Games takes this voyeuristic premise and shifts our alignment. While we are literally an audience watching the events unfold, the story is told from Katniss's perspective, and so our sympathies and the stakes are squarely with her. And while those of us watching are most likely not coal miners, it is more likely that our socioeconomic status more closely resembles that of a character in the district than it does the citizens of the Capitol. The citizens of the Capitol are wealthy and out of touch with the realities that make their lifestyles possible.
Try one of these. They are divine.
No, I can't eat another thing.
Here.
What's this?
It's for when you're full. It makes you sick, so you can go on eating.
How else could you taste everything?
When we watch The Hunger Games, we're rooting for Katniss and we pick our favorite players. At the same time that we're condemning the fictional events that make The Hunger Games possible, we choose our favorite players and we root at the deaths of their adversaries. Squid Game takes this premise a step further by adding in the illusion of free will. The players are invited to a game, they're not being forced to play, and while they are at first unaware of the true consequences of losing, the threat of death ultimately doesn't deter them, and when they are given a choice to leave, a majority of them return to continue the game, as the promise of the reward is too great. But the game would not exist without a society that creates extreme financial distress, basically ensuring that there is always going to be a pool of players. The illusion is contingent on the idea of class mobility. You're not rich now, but someday you might be.
Yeah, that'll show those poor.
Why are you cheering, Fry? You're not rich.
True, but someday I might be rich, and then people like me better watch their step.
In episode 2 of Squid Game, the narrative goes out of its way to showcase a particular book, Lacan's Seminar 11. Whenever a book is shown in a work of fiction, it's a good idea to pay close attention, as it usually acts as a roadmap for how the author wants their work to be read. This idea comes from Paul Demon's Allegories of Reading, and it's used in everything. Simulacra and simulation in The Matrix, The Idiot and It Follows. You can think of these scenes as the movie equivalent of an epigraph. So what is Lacan's work doing in Squid Game? Jacques Lacan was a French psychoanalyst and theorist whose main focus was human subjectivity, and his writings are notoriously difficult to understand. Between the years 1952 and 1980, he gave an annual lecture where he essentially gave new interpretation of Freud's work. And Seminar 11 was all about the theory of desire. Now, Lacan's theory of desire is super complex, so I'm just going to talk about it and how it relates to Squid Game. Desire, according to Lacan, is the opposite of enjoyment. Enjoyment is when you derive pleasure from something, and desire is when you forego your own bodily pleasure in order to reach something beyond the pleasure principle. And in Squid Game, the players are literally risking their own bodies in order to obtain wealth. Lacan would say that anyone who chooses desire over enjoyment is someone who is already symbolically dead. This is what Lacan calls the two deaths. You have the physical death of the body and the symbolic death. And the liminal space between these two deaths is associated with unconditional and limitless demand. Every single character that plays the game is already symbolically dead. They don't register in society, they don't mean anything, and so they choose desire over pleasure in order to resuscitate their symbolic deaths into an actual life. And this is why playing Squid Game is not a free choice. It is the illusion of choice.
How much do you think it had to pay him to lick the dust off all this dusty stuff?
Dude, I do not approve of the way you're spending money right now.
Dude, they're not doing anything they don't want to. They want my sweet cheddar, and I want to see some stuff in exchange. It's mutual. Free market.
What?
Free market.
It is the attempt of those who are symbolically dead to return to the living by means of prioritizing desire. It is capitalistic exploitation taken to its most extreme conclusion. In his book, Capitalism and Desire, theorist Tom McGowan states, "Capitalism has the effect of sustaining subjects in a constant state of desire. As subjects of capitalism, we are constantly on the edge of having our desire realized, but never reach the point of realization. This has the effect of producing a satisfaction that we don't recognize as such. That is, capitalist subjects experience satisfaction itself as dissatisfying, which enables them to simultaneously enjoy themselves and believe wholeheartedly that a more complete satisfaction exists just around the corner, embodied in the newest commodity." The masked VIPs then, the fictional audience watching the games, are shown as off-putting, even inhuman, precisely from their lack of desire. They have a lack of lack. Like the citizens in the capital, they are embodiments of unbridled desire itself. And yet, we are also aligned with them in that we are watching and presumably deriving pleasure from watching the same events that they are. So which is it? Are we the audience or are we the contestants? Well, it depends on your desires. No, I'm just kidding. It's both. It's both in that we are always existing in the liminal space between aspiration and achieving those aspirations. None of us are actually competing in a death contest, and none of us are actually watching them. Hopefully. But we are existing and competing in a capitalistic society. And if there's no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism, we can at least be entertained by it.